boats are small, they're overloaded.
South-southwest, 21 to 23 knots. You've got a feel for people that get stuck out in that.
They're crossing the busiest thoroughfare for shipping in the world. People will die.
We heard a mayday. It was pitch black, and we was looking on the radar. We heard a ferry call the Coast Guard and say they thought they'd spotted something. The chap at the front, he had a flashlight, and something flashed back from the distance in the dark. So we motored over to it. As we got close, we could see it was a very small inflatable dinghy, which looked massively overcrowded. We then called the Coast Guard, and they was there within 3 minutes. They'd been at sea for 6 hours.
New Year, old problems. Over the Christmas period, news began circulating of illegal migrants crossing the English Channel from France and landing on southern UK beaches. They were making their journeys on tiny rubber dinghies provided to them by human traffickers on the continent who they'd paid to help them out, and they'd claim asylum as soon as they reached land. Some of them had to be rescued in the middle of the sea, which always turns out to be rather convenient for them, since they then get a nice taxi service on a safer, warmer boat, are given food and water, and still reach their end destination, usually in quicker time. We've seen this pattern over and over again for years in the Mediterranean, and now it seems the trend is coming to Britain. When the news broke, the government tried their absolute damnedest to make it appear like they were springing into action to protect our borders, with Home Secretary Sajid Javid going as far to cut short his family holiday in order to fly back to London to tackle the crisis.
Understand, some people say, well, these aren't huge numbers, but let's also remember that our job here is to make sure this doesn't turn into some new route for ever increased illegal migration. So I want to try and stop it now as much as I possibly can. But also, this is a very, very treacherous journey. It's a lot more dangerous than other routes that we've known of in the past, and no one wants to see a fatality.
Gavin Williamson also joined in, boldly claiming that the British Armed Forces are ready to be called upon if needed. Well, thank God we have a strong Conservative government in charge to protect us, eh? Yeah, bollocks. Don't be fooled by this peacocking. Under this Conservative government, immigration to this country, both legal and illegal, has been through the roof. Social tensions between different ethnic groups have worsened. We've been ravaged by terrorism, etc, etc, etc. You don't need me to go on about it. These people are useless. They're completely ineffectual, and when they pull stunts like this, you should roll your eyes and go back to the pub. I've made many videos about the migrant crisis. I don't think I need to go into massive detail on the subject, but let me briefly communicate my personal position just in case there are any newcomers watching. Basically, I firmly hold the position that not a single one of these people should be allowed entry to my country. On a wider front, none of the millions of people who have entered Europe via the Mediterranean these past couple of years should have been allowed to stay either. The majority of these people are economic migrants. They have come to Europe for financial gain, and their presence doesn't benefit us in any way whatsoever. You see, I hold the radical opinion that Europe should be for Europeans, that our nations and governments should put the interests of their own people first. Yet that's not what has been happening in Europe in recent times, is it? No. Now, third world migrants are not only welcomed on a massive scale, but are encouraged to come here. This is unsustainable, not only from a practical point of view, but from an ethical one. Flooding our homelands with outsiders who don't share our heritage, genes, cultures, or beliefs will lead, eventually, to the downfall of our civilization. This is obvious to me and most people who follow me, and the majority of normal people, not only in Britain but across the Western world, share these sentiments too. But because of the ideological tyranny of organisations like the European Union, as well as prominent mainstream media outlets, an atmosphere of fear has been created, preventing many from expressing their true, bigoted, Nazi, fascist, genocidal views, or whatever you want to call them. Because, anyone who has serious concerns about these things is automatically evil. Some on the left, after hearing what I've just said, will surely be scoffing and dismissing my words as ridiculous hyperbole. They'll say that I'm scaremongering, they'll say I'm deliberately overreacting to the situation, and they'll point out that the numbers of people coming to Britain via the English Channel compared to those crossing the Mediterranean are extremely small. The Guardian has been using this illustration lately, making the point that we on the right are exaggerating the problem in order to spread our anti-immigration bigotry. And they're right, at least in terms of figures. When they say the amount of migrants landing on British beaches is nowhere near the amount that places like Greece and Italy have had to suffer in recent years, yeah, correct. There are clear reasons for this though, aren't there? First of all, obviously, we in Britain are in a safer geographical location. We aren't directly opposite Northern Africa, thus it goes without saying that we'll avoid the mass of this movement of people. Unfortunately, Southern Europe couldn't avoid it, and they've been ravaged by a mass invasion that, by the way, these very left-wingers and open borders activists also supported. But more on that later. Secondly, just because numbers at this point in time are relatively small, doesn't mean we shouldn't treat them seriously. At the end of the day, these people have no right to be here, and they should be immediately returned to where they came from. I don't care if we're dealing with 500 people or 50,000 people, they should all be treated exactly the same way. Because we've seen time and time again over the last few years, if you don't deal with this harshly, all you'll end up achieving is encouraging more people to make the journey, because they get it in their minds that they won't be punished. Look at the problems Spain is having to deal with now, with Africans storming their border posts. I don't think it's outrageous to suggest that these people were perhaps motivated to do this after they saw how welcoming the Spanish were to the Aquarius migrant rescue ship, for example. If that boat and every other boat was turned away, maybe the optimism instilled in all of these migrants wouldn't be as strong. You give them an inch and they'll take a mile. However, despite pro-migration activists accusing people like me of overreacting and politicising such a small issue, they haven't wasted any time in doing the exact same thing, using this story to get their usual anti-British digs in, accusing us of hypocrisy because we're so concerned with immigration yet don't care about the homeless on our streets or people using food banks. Also, remember the British Empire? Oh yes, even that gets brought up as usual because white people bad. These people willfully ignore that migration is the biggest civilizational issue of our time. And while homelessness is a problem too, that we'd all like to see addressed, including me, it's not on the same level. In fact, if these people did have their way and Britain simply allowed anyone who wanted to claim asylum in Britain to do so, that would add further problems to the homeless situation. Because there'd be more people in the country claiming financial aid from the state, stretching resources even more. But whatever, let's not think ahead, shall we? Let's not think about the future, let's just denigrate the past and the present. One woman who has enjoyed the limelight on the back of this crisis is open borders and pro-refugee campaigner Bridget Chapman, who founded a charity named the Kent Anti-Racist Network, which is of course staffed by nobody else than middle-aged, middle-class white people. Just an observation. According to her bio, she loves cats, cake, and Corbyn. Yes, all standard stuff so far, stereotypically so actually. She even has a picture with him. Well, it's nice to see the sort of people who could have the ear of our future Prime Minister, isn't it? She also loathes bigots, misogynists, and xenophobes who I'm assuming she sees around every corner. Looking through the Kent Anti-Racist Twitter page, you see all the telltale signs of idiocy. Regularly retweeting official Antifa accounts and other similar organisations, as well as crowdfunding for legal fees for their activists who have been arrested. I wonder what they got arrested for. Bridget has made the most of this recent opportunity, being featured on various TV reports where she has expressed her typical bleeding heart talking points, such as this BBC clip where she brings up Alan Kurdi, the child that washed up on the beaches of Europe in 2015, that was pounced upon by people like Bridget to guilt us all into allowing the mass invasion of our continent to happen.
We're forcing people into the hands of people traffickers because we've made it impossible for them to come any other way. People were very upset a few years ago when Alan Kurdi, the toddler, was washed up on a beach. And I really worry that, we're going to end up with somebody drowning on the shores of this country. The people arriving to be clear, are not trying to hide. They've got a legitimate right to seek asylum.
Amazing how they're still referencing this, isn't it? As if they can continue pretending that the vast majority of migrants travelling here aren't military-aged young men, with children being in a minority. And the claim that they have genuine right to asylum is questionable at best, and even if they did, European law says they need to claim asylum in the first safe country they enter. Well, they've passed through bloody loads of safe countries to get to the shores of England, so what's the deal with that, Bridget? If you were a genuine asylum seeker, wouldn't you just be happy to be in a place where you weren't going to get shot? These people are treating Europe like a pick and mix. A bit of Greece, a bit of Italy, a nice chunk of France, but a big bag full of Britain, please. Thank you very much. Money, money, money. Bridget was then invited onto Good Morning Britain, where her real views were highlighted for all to hear.
But you're saying the opposite in a sense. Your argument is actually let more people come in, make it easier for them to do so. Why is that your argument?
I think the UK has a slightly overinflated sense of its attraction to people seeking asylum. Actually, most people seeking asylum don't come here. The numbers that we're talking about are relatively small. These people have a right to seek asylum under the Geneva Convention, and they shouldn't have to risk their lives to do that. We're pushing...
Why can't they seek it in France, though?
Well,
They're coming
you're talking about
there.
the Dublin regulations, and there's all sorts of issues around the Dublin regulations. It basically means that people... Countries like Greece and Italy, which are the first country in which people come into from outside of Europe, end up taking disproportionately far more people, and we're taking disproportionately far fewer. We have a duty to step in. Not everybody wants to come here. I think we need to be really clear about that. And I'd rather we weren't calling them migrants. These people are almost certainly going to have valid asylum claims. So they're asylum seekers rather than migrants. At the moment, we're pushing them into the hands of the people traffickers. That's what the UK government is doing. We could stop this overnight if we... You know, we're a small charity. It's not up to us to write government policy. But if we set up an office in France, process people's valid, almost certainly valid asylum claims, and then gave them safe passage, we'd stop this overnight.
God, what a load of nonsense. So first of all, this idea that very few migrants even want to come to Britain is a huge lie, and she knows it. Immigration to this country is off the charts, and the only reason we've been spared the sheer onslaught that countries like Greece and Italy have faced is due to our geographical location. Of course Britain is a favoured destination by many in the third world. How the hell does she explain the thousands of illegals in Calais right now, who spend their time trying to sneak onto trucks to get across the channel? But never mind, her big concern is people traffickers profiting from these people and sending them out to sea in unsafe boats. According to her, this is our fault, because we aren't blindly accepting refugees at face value. So her solution is to start accepting them at face value, even going as far to process their applications in France and then move them over to Britain. Wow, what an absolute genius. Who knew that the answer to the migrant crisis was to just let them all in?
I don't think we have a migrant crisis here. I think we have a moral crisis. The way the government is dealing with this issue is appalling. These people are in need, and we need to be helping them. I come from Folkestone, and during the First World War, when Germany invaded Belgium and people were displaced, as they always are, this country took in 250,000 people from Belgium in a couple of months. They came in small boats across the channel. There's a picture in the Folkestone Museum of the mayor in his chains and flower girls welcoming them. What has changed? When did we become so hard? This is an absolute disgrace. But
Can't get through a conversation without mentioning the bloody Second World War, these people, can they? What has changed, Bridget? Well, that should be obvious. First of all, we're not in the middle of a world war that is unnecessarily tearing Europe apart. First difference right there. Secondly, those people from Belgium were Europeans. The millions of migrants crossing the Med are not. In fact, they've got no connection to Europe whatsoever. No bloodline, no history, no love for it. They don't speak the languages. They don't share our genetics or outlook on the world. They are fundamentally different human beings, and when they arrive in our societies, especially in huge numbers, those differences manifest themselves in destructive ways. And I hope I don't need to go into detail again on how destructive immigration policy has been for this country. Also, framing this event as a moral issue is another clever little tactic used by activists like Bridget. You see, if you're not supportive of bringing these people in, you are objectively a bad person. No ifs, no buts. Bridget and her middle-class anti-fascists will be on the right side of history and will hopefully have statues erected in their honour. That's the thought process here.
when you talk, as you were, about the Second World War and 250,000 refugees being taken in, people saying, are you saying we should take 250,000? Should we take 250,000 every year, every month? As you say, we are facing a huge... In the coming years, there's going to be a lot more people on the move. Where do we stop?
Look at her face. It says it all. She'd import the bloody lot of them if she could. She's not in favour of restrictions. For her, it's open borders all the way. Never mind the consequences, never mind the cost, just never mind anything. Let them all in is what she's thinking.
We have to do what's right.
Where do we stop?
Well, I don't think everybody wants to come here. I don't think people want to leave. No, I don't. Sorry, but this is scaremongering.
We don't know talking about. Hang on, but no, this is what people said about when. This is one of the concerns about EU immigration and freedom of movement. People said no, they won't all want to come, and then too many people did, and it upset a lot of people.
That is a totally different issue.
It is a different argument, but you're relying on psychology there.
Let me speak. Please. It's a totally... Well, you weren't. It's a totally different issue. We're talking about asylum seekers and we're talking about the Geneva Convention. Brexit has got nothing to do with the Geneva Convention. It doesn't... Whether we're in or out, that doesn't change. Our duty to accept people with genuine asylum claims does not change.
Bridget, when would you stop? Would you take in 250,000 people a month?
We took in 250... I don't think 250,000 of people are going to come. We look at genuine... Well, we look at genuine asylum claims.
How would you feed them? How would you house them? These are the practical problems. You're looking at me and laughing. But
I'm not laughing. I know that's what people feel because the media has generated a false narrative.
Well, you're on the media. Give the right narrative.
I am.
How would you?
I can't get a word in edge.
No, you're not answering my question. But you're just accusing the media.
The conversation basically ends here as they go back and forth. But Bridget was pretty transparent there, wasn't she? And the cheek of her to say that the media is anti-immigration is laughable. She's living in a country where the media, the champagne socialists if you will, the people she spends her days surrounded by, believe in all the things she does. She gets challenged just one little bit on this show and suddenly the media is hateful and bigoted towards migrants. But Bridget's goal, along with her peers, is to fundamentally weaken Britain at the foundations as much as possible. On her Facebook page, she linked to a simply horrendous article in The Guardian by Kevin McKenna. The title reads, "We should be ashamed at our response to this refugee crisis. Already it's all our fault. We need to feel guilty." They don't even build up to this stuff anymore, they just do it straight away. I won't read the whole thing because quite frankly it's vomit-inducing. Just a few excerpts, but please try and refrain from throwing your computer out your window. I'm not going to pay for it. Sometimes you can smell the stench of racism before you are actually upon it. As a child, I recall walking on the sands of one of Scotland's most popular beaches and wondering why the whiff of human waste hung heavy in the air. A broken sewage pipe on a grass verge held the answer. When you encounter racism in the raw or the utter absence of compassion at the plight of people fleeing death and torture, it's like looking into an open sewer. Strong start, 8 out of 10 I'd give that. Associating people like you and me with shit. Literally. It's always a good way to go. It sets the tone for the article though, doesn't it? You know it's going to be an anti-British and probably an anti-white propaganda piece. As the article goes on its usual talking points, he also brings up the dead Syrian boy on the beach for example because, you know, feel bad about that again everyone. Then he hysterically claims that the fears of organised crime and Islamic terrorism coming along with the migrant hordes were nothing more than a false narrative and a right-wing scaremongering tactic. Did the last 3 years simply not happen in this guy's mind? I'm genuinely confused. But then we get to the centerpiece and the real point of why he's writing this article. Prepare yourselves. As we root around in these dark places seeking righteousness for our indignation, we talk about protecting our borders and our identity. At other times, we talk of our pride at being Scottish or English or British. What bizarre and foolish concepts. It's like being proud of having 2 eyes. They imply that being Scottish or English or British is to be bound by loftier values. Yet, when we travel, we find that people are all really the same. They respond well to kindness. They like to share what they have. They want to bequeath peace upon their children. Our nationality is an accident of birth. We do not own this country. We are merely stewards of its resources, and I hope one day that we will be judged on how well we have shared them. England does indeed need to get a grip. If it doesn't, it will become a furious, implacable and unforgiving place. Let's welcome these refugees at Dover and share with them what remains of our bloated Western Christmas. Gotta get a dig at Christmas in there. Got to. There you have it. Pride in one's identity is a bizarre and foolish thing. Yet, I can't imagine him saying that about proud Muslims, or proud black people, or hell, proud Syrians. I don't know about you guys, but I think he might draw the line at that. To suggest that one's identity as a human being is completely idiotic and childish, and that we should all just be stripped down, empty robots who only react to surface-based things like good little programmed individuals, always having the correct response to any given situation, the correct opinions. Well, this is exactly what these people want to bring about. We're all the same, really, aren't we? When we travel, everyone is nice and welcoming. Well, yes, Kevin, maybe the places you go on holiday to, civilized places, you know, like Europe. Not so much in backward parts of the world though, as those two poor Scandinavian girls found out recently. This article is so spot on in terms of summing up the mindset of these open borders fanatics, who have strong, powerful allies in the government by the way, so don't dismiss them as cranks just yet. This is pure delusion. Whether they even believe it or not is up in the air for me. They must at least have to force themselves to believe it, right? It seems completely unnatural to have these opinions when you're older than 15 years old. Unless they're so atomized by their surroundings, the social circles that they're paid to be a part of. Maybe they really are just NPCs for real. But they will lead us to ruin because they want the whole damn place to burn. The migrant crisis isn't really about the migrants themselves. It's a civil war within the West, between those of us who value our homes and those of us who want to tear them down. It's an identity war, based around an identity crisis. Our minds have been poisoned for decades, little by little, drip and drab, to make us believe that this great, wondrous civilization we call Europe, the West, really isn't so great, and actually could be immeasurably improved by turning it into something completely different. The migrant crisis is just one way that goal can be achieved. So it doesn't matter if there's only 500 people crossing the English Channel. It's about the wider war we're fighting, and what's at stake, and what we have to lose. Thank you for watching. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year. I feel refreshed, I have to say. I took a bit of time off. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so via PayPal. The link is down below. Thank you to everyone who donates. Now, I have deleted my Patreon account, so that won't be an option anymore. And as far as I know, at least when I'm recording this, Subscribestar still hasn't gotten their shit together in terms of payouts or new subscribers or whatever. So I'm going to hold off from promoting that just now. When that's all ready and complete, then I'll promote it, and I'll have the credits on the end of my videos as usual. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.